This proposed ordinance came to us in response to these impromptu, spontaneous demonstrations, parades, whatever you may call them, that occurred several years ago and occurred multiple times. Before I go on, I must say that the committee that worked on this and the legal staff that worked on this do need to be commended. This is a very thorny issue, very difficult. They toiled through many other side issues, many lengthy and probably somewhat boring and protracted meetings, and reams of legal research. The problem, though, is that the ordinance doesn't regulate, I think, the very issue that brought this before us. It does not regulate parades it does not regulate parades unless they result from some type of prior planning. It even goes beyond parades to public assemblies that result from prior planning, which is not an issue, I think, that brought this issue before us. It affects much more than what brought this issue before us without addressing the initial problem. I think to sit on this dais as a council person and to assure those members of the public that spoke here tonight in favor of this ordinance, that this ordinance will address, regulate, limit, or impact the concerns that brought this ordinance before us that they raised tonight, for me it would be misleading because it doesn't address those. In prior committee meetings, our deputy chief, our corporation counsel have stated that the impromptu parades, those that lack prior planning, would not be covered by this ordinance. They're expressly exempt, and they must be. You can't regulate something that someone is not engaging in prior planning in order to come up with a plan to present to the city. With regard to the fines, the city's attorney stated at previous committee meetings that the fines could not be imposed on just anyone who participated, but that it would have to be somebody who knew that the event required a permit, and secondly, participated knowing that no permit was obtained, which is very difficult for those who sort of spill onto the streets and join a march. In fact, it would probably be the organizing committee only that could be fined. And with regard to the amount of the fines, the city is limited by the state. If we wanted to impose fines of $1,000 or $2,000 to stop certain conduct, we're very limited. There's state statute which limits city imposed fines to approximately $100 for general safety, health, and welfare. We have to change state law, and we've tried in the past, and the mayor has tried in the past, and those have been blocked at the state level. The main problem impacting our residents is not with 25 people, as this ordinance would cover, or 50 people, or 75, but with hundreds of people blocking our roads, blocking our sidewalks, blocking intersections, blocking driveways, which the deputy chief in the past, I think the police chief stated here tonight, is currently a violation of our existing traffic laws, both at the state level and the local level, as well as a bunch of other health, safety, and welfare laws that we have on the books. While even some impromptu parades may have, as we discussed at our committee meeting, some prior planning, some discussion. If the issue came up as if we're watching a game and it's a playoff game and there's a bunch of people saying, hey, if the Sox win, we're going to go run down Main Street. And we're going to beep our horns.
Maybe not the Sox.
Well, based on this season so far. But I was born in Boston. That being said, but simply as a minor discussion is not prior planning under state case law. Prior planning to sort of incur the imposition of the regulation of government requires a substantial step to the execution of what you plan to do. So talking at a bar about getting together after the game would not make it prior planning which was subject to the ordinance, unfortunately, so it wouldn't cover that conduct. Beyond that, though, this ordinance will impose restrictions, I think, on those who obey the law currently, while expressly exempting, as it must under the law, those who break our laws, who break our social compact of common decency to their neighbors, and should be fined, punished, and prosecuted under existing laws. I also think the ordinance goes far beyond regulating parades. For those who may not know, it regulates public assemblies, not just on streets and sidewalks, but in public parks and other places that are owned by the city of Denver, possibly the state, which will possibly be exempted. 25 people or more gathering in a public place doesn't seem to be the problem. It seems to be many more people gathering on our streets and sidewalks. So with that, what I would offer is the following amendment to allow this ordinance to still afford the city notice of parades, to allow the chief of police to have at least some level of oversight with regard to permitting, but not to go beyond that which seems reasonable. The amendment would be as follows. to amend Section 1115A to increase the number from 25 people to more than 100 people, to remove subsection D, public assembly, and to limit the restrictions or the regulations to those events that would block sidewalks and streets, as opposed to the broader definition covering places, public areas,
Second. Motion's been made and seconded by Councilman Perkins. We are now on amendment to the ordinance as proposed. So any debate would have to relate to the amendment. Any amending of this particular ordinance would require back to public hearing and back to the process again. I just want to make clear that the council's aware of the process. Having said that, any discussion relating to the amendment? Mr. Rotel, then Mrs. Jefferson.
Thanks, Your Honor.
The amendment.
This ordinance seems to have 4 levels of discomfort for the community that it addresses. The first level, interestingly enough, is essentially nothing at all. The second level is some minor interference. The third level is some substantial interference. This has to do with traffic, with pedestrian and vehicular interruptions. And the fourth and final level seems to be closing. In other words, the ordinance appears to kick in when an organizer, again, as Councilman Sadi eloquently stated, this only affects prior planned events. But it seems to kick in or require a permit when an organizer believes there is going to be some amount of interference with the normal flow of traffic, whether that's pedestrian traffic or vehicular. And this applies to both parades, as we know them, people marching down the street, and also...
I just want to question, you really got to keep your comments to the amendment, not to the ordinance. We'll be back to debating the ordinance once we do the amendment. Go ahead if you want to address Mr. Sadi's amendment.
The amendment is to remove section, I believe it's the assembly definition, which would be 1115D. Public assembly means any meeting, demonstration, picket line, rally, or gathering. That particular section, it didn't really come up when this initial parade ordinance was conceived, because again, the conception of this was to somehow regulate or restrict or attenuate these massive, at the time, what the community felt were massive, impromptu demonstrations of a parade-like event. And we found out almost immediately that the parade ordinance can't address those. How the assembly ordinance wound up in there, I can't remember. I was not on the ad hoc committee. I tried to attend every one of them, but I don't remember how it specifically got in. I'm sure there was a good reason for it. Probably some sort of way of sneaking out of claiming you're having a parade by saying that you're having an assembly, so it might have, at the time, seemed like a good idea. The problem now is that it's a bad idea, and the reason that this is a bad idea is because the ordinance now is internally inconsistent, and that's a cardinal sin for an ordinance. If the ordinance insists that you have to get a permit.
It's about the amendment. You really want to stick to
Okay, this is about the assembly portion of the amendment. The ordinance insists that you have to get a permit if you're going to interrupt traffic. If you're not going to interrupt traffic, you still have to notify the police, but you don't have to get a permit. The inconsistency is follows, and this is from 1122. This affects both assembly and parade. The chief of police shall issue you a permit when he finds that you won't substantially interrupt the movement of other pedestrian or vehicular traffic next to your route or location. The word that they use is contiguous, which means it's from Latin, it means next to. So, you need to get a permit to have your assembly if you think you're going to be interrupting traffic, but the police can't give you that permit if they think you will be interrupting traffic. And that is a very dangerous inconsistency, because it essentially means, for the most part, you will be granted your permit. But when someone isn't granted that permit, they can then take us back to court and say to the judge that, look, these guys are essentially ignoring their own ordinance. So yes, it's a good amendment. Let's remove the assembly. Let's send this back to public hearing. Let's remove the internal inconsistencies. There are a few more, and I can speak to them later. But the real problem is putting aside constitutionality issues and whether we think it is or it isn't, or you're in favor of regulation or not. The basic problem with this ordinance that a lot of people worked really hard on and changed and evolved over the last 12 to 14 weeks is that it's now become something that is internally broken and it doesn't need to be fixed. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Adele. Councilman Habersek, on the amendment.
Thank you, Your Honor. On the amendment, I guess knowing that we have 152 sworn officers, when we come down to this issue of permits for public assembly, I wish Mr. Foley hadn't left because I think we could hire him. He could work full-time in our special division of public assembly permitting in the Danbury Police Department. But I want those 152 folks doing police work. And the public assembly inclusion at that low number of one more than 25 puts an awful responsibility on the police department. I like the parade permit. It was Chinese border torture, but you finally worn me down, Attorney Gottschalk. You know, I think we can have reasonable time, place, and manner on parades, and there are a few of them. But unless we're going to hire Carl Foley and give him half of our permit center down in the basement for the long lines of people coming in for their public assembly permits, I think we need to adopt the amendment.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Further discussion on the amendment. Mr. Shays.
Thank you. Again, on the amendment, I think one of the things an ordinance needs to obtain is two things: is to protect our public, but it's also not to create undue hardship on our police department. By having 25 persons will, in fact, do more harm than good, because 25 is a very low number. I mean, this council is 21 alone, and if we were to walk outside, that would be considered a public assembly. But I think if you have at least 100 people, I think that will take some of that undue hardship away from our police and will help manage it better so they don't have to be day to day accepting permits for 25, 26 people. Well, in my opinion, I don't think that'll be is a problem on the police to handle an assembly of 25 people. That really doesn't cause a lot of traffic violations or disruption to where it needs a permit. So I would hope that this council will again approve this amendment as well. But I also like to make a friendly amendment as well, if Councilman Sadi will also accept it, is also on Section 1118 on the applications. So this was also brought up in committee. It was also brought up at the public hearing as well, regarding the number of days required to be submitted for a permit. Currently, it says 3 days is the the minimum allowed. But I guess Chief Baker said that would cause hardship to his department because 3 days may not give him enough time to get the proper number of police to that event. For example, if you had on a Thursday evening at 4 o'clock, I come to Chief Baker and said, I have a permit for a 2000 parade for Sunday. Well, that's within the 3 days that's required. But to give him 1 day to get 20 police officers to that event would be very difficult indeed to obtain. So what he said at the committee that 5 days is more than enough adequate time to get enough police to any event. So I'd like to make that friendly amendment to change on 1118 in paragraph B from 3 days to 5 days.
Mr. Sadi, do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Perkins, do you hold your second to this friendly amendment? Okay. Seeing that, then Mr. Sadi's motion is going to be recovered. We're back to the amendment. I'm on this side. I know Mrs. Saraceno's had her hand up, so Councilman go first.
Thank you. It's no secret to anybody here my passion for this particular ordinance, and being one of those people that worked on the committee. I think that Mr. Sadi's amendment has some merit, but I'd hate to see us amending this ordinance on the fly like this. So I would like to make a recommendation that we recommit the ordinance to committee and discuss these things. And I'd also like to invite all the people that came here tonight to talk for the first time on this ordinance and bring up issues that we were not aware of, perhaps, or nobody mentioned in the months and months and months that we had committee meetings, would you please come and participate and make your ideas known while we're working instead of after our work is done?
We currently have an amendment on the floor. A motion to recommit will supersede the amendment. A motion to recommit will, for the council's information, refer this back to an ad hoc, back to a public hearing. I don't believe, is there debate, Mr. Gottschalk, on a motion to recommit? There certainly is debatable. We need a second right now.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Vitale. So the motion would be to refer it back to an ad hoc, which would then have, any changes made would then have to go back to public hearing, and we'll see you in about 3 years. Having said that, is there any debate on this particular issue? Mr. Tremblay, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We are on the motion to recommit.
I'm sorry?
We are on the motion to recommit and send this back to committee.
I withdraw.
Mr. Seabury.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just as a point of order or clarification, in order to recommit, is that a simple majority? Thank you.
Say again, Mr. Seabury.
Gosh, for answering me. The question was, in order for this to be recommitted to committee and public hearing and all that, does it have to be a simple majority to do so?
The vote would be, yes, the vote would be a simple majority. Any further discussion on the motion to recommit? Having said that, I'm going to ask seeing none then, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll. I'm asking for a roll call vote.
Clarification, Your Honor.
Motion to be
Yes is a recommit. Yes.
A yes vote would send us back to committee, back to another public hearing, and a no vote would be to continue on with the debate discussion tonight.
McMahon? No. Negachev? No. Johnson?
No.
Trombetta?
No, thank you.
Pellegrino?
No.
Perkins?
Yes.
Genies?
Yes.
Esposito?
Yes.
Sadi?
Yes.
Cabo?
No.
Basso?
No.
Vitello?
Yes.
Diggs?
Yes.
Keischolz?
No.
Riley?
Yes.
Saraceno?
Yes.
Seabury?
No.
Stanley?
Yes.
Teversek?
Yes.
Council, back to order, please. Based on the discussion tonight, and based on the fact that we have beat this ordinance to death over the last 10 months, I think it's time we act tonight. I'm going to exercise my right to vote here, which means that there will be a 10-10 tie, which kills the motion to recommit. We'll have further discussion on the amendments as proposed.
Point of order. Challenge the chair.
Motion is made to challenge the ruling of the chair. Is there a second to challenge the ruling of the chair? Okay. Well, first, let me just rule that Mr. Sadi is out of order. He's challenged that. Seconded by Mr. Shianisi. Any discussion on the ruling of the chair? No discussion. Mr. Gottschalk, did you want to clarify the parliamentary?
The chair may vote to make or break the tie when it affects the result. In this case, the vote stands prior to the mayor's vote at 10 to 9 in favor. 10 to 9 in favor. If he votes in the negative, so without his vote, 10 to 9 passes. With his vote, he chooses to vote no, then it becomes 10 to 10, and the motion fails. So he makes the tie.
So Mr. Sadi has challenged the ruling of Mr. Gottschalk on this. With that, we'll...
With that explanation to the council, I accept Corporation Council's ruling. I withdraw my objection or challenge to the chair.
Motion's been made, withdrawn. Second, I'm going to ask the clerk for a roll call vote. A no vote would be to support the amendment. A yes vote would be to support the amendment. Mrs. Patel.
McMahon.
No.
Nagashev.
No.
Johnson.
No.
Trombetta.
No.
Pellegrino.
No.
Denise.
Yes.
Esposito.
Yes.
Sadi.
Yes.
Cabo.
No.
Basso.
No.
Vitello.
Yes.
Higgs.
Yes.
Keisholz.
No.
Riley.
Yes.
Saraceno.
Yes.
Seabury. Stanley.
Yes.
Seversack.
Yes.
All right, 7-5. There being the vote identical to the previous vote, 10-9, again, the chair is going to exercise his right to vote to tie the vote and fill the motion. We're back now to the, so that would be in the negative. We're now back to the main ordinance. Mr. Copper.
Your Honor, just for the record, this issue has been hashed and rehashed and hashed again. It seems like at every turn, when it seems like we have a resolve to the issue, we have a certain group of the council that just is going to be obstruction of this ordinance no matter what. And I just would caution my fellow council people that no matter how this goes back, and if this goes back to committee, this will come out and this will be voted no by certain members of this council, regardless. They will vote no on this because they just don't want it. They are obstructing it. They will do everything they can in their power to obstruct it. I will be voting yes for this ordinance tonight, and I encourage you all to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Tello. Now we're back to the main ordinance.
Your Honor, I found that last comment disappointing. The actual vote on the council was 10 to 9 in favor of the amendment. The preceding vote to recommit was 10 to 9. This is not a small portion of troublemakers. This is the majority of the council tonight speaking and would have been heard had His Honor not jumped in and exercised his prerogative to vote. This is not some small minority of troublemakers. This is the actual majority of this council that has and has had a problem with this ordinance and its inconsistencies for the past 3 months. What we have is a small minority that is trying to put its will on the majority of the council tonight and the people of Danbury. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Regarding the comments as made by the President of the Common Council, I find that it's somewhat offensive that one could vote their conscience after listening to people that address this body, and that we would have a President of the Common Council that would say that we are just trying to obstruct or whatever it might be what has happened. That's absolutely insane. The whole idea of a democratic council government is to debate the issues, and this issue, you can see, is quite strong, and therefore for one to speak from a position of more power, in all due respect to President Powell, it's totally out of whack. You can't try to limit one's feeling and how they're going to react to a particular vote, because it's ultimately it comes down to the taxpayer. It comes down to our constituency. So I really resent that, and I'm going to say it right out loud. And take it for what it's worth, but I'd rather not have you do it again.